So thank you everyone for joining our webinar session today on accelerating digital transformation with cloud solutions. With us, we today have Lance Burek, who's a manufacturing business consultant at GE Vernova. We also have Lee Jellum, who's the manufacturing industry principal here at GE Vernova. And then finally, we have Lulu Wright, the manufacturing business consultant at GE Vernova as well. So with that, I'm going to move on to some housekeeping items. So as the webinar is going, make sure that you're muted. If you have any questions, please enter them in the chat or raise your hand and unmute yourself. We will make sure to answer questions as they come. If you need any technical assistance, you can reach out to me directly at the email provided here. This session will be recorded and will be shared with you after this webinar. And then finally, there will be a quick survey in the end, and we would really appreciate any feedback on the webinar session today. I'm going to pass it to our speaker.
What we're going to be discussing in terms of our agenda. So first, we'll start off with some industry trends. From there, we'll jump into SaaS, really what is SaaS. From there, we'll jump into SaaS consideration elements. We'll then actually dive into accelerating digital transformation. Then we'll talk about the secrets to success as well as a customer story. But we'll go ahead and jump into that first section of industry trends here. Roni, next slide, please. We can go ahead and go to the next slide as well. So first, we'll start off with industry trends within computing. And when we take a look at trends in the computing evolution, what we can see is where we've started with those physical machines. We've then moved to VMs and then into containerization. And then from there, what we've ultimately moved to is the serverless cloud approach. And across industries, customers are moving from building these monolithic applications that run on these physical machines, ultimately to this serverless application approach. And this makes it easier for customers to deploy, configure, as well as update their software. Next slide, please. But why are industrial customers moving to the cloud? And there's a plethora of reasons, but this really starts with cost optimization. So you're no longer over procuring for hardware. Your capacity is now matching your demand. There's also a large sustainability part of this. So large cloud providers run on a percentage of renewable resource power and are also up to 5 times more efficient than a standard data center. There's also an acceleration factor, so in terms of being able to implement faster, and that allows us to leverage out-of-the-box capabilities as reduce overall technical debt. Now, the cloud is also extremely secure, and large cloud providers have an army of people working in cybersecurity and are always staying up to date on the most recent technology. And then what we can also do is extend our solution. So we can leverage the cloud providers network of ISVs. There's also a productivity aspect. So we can now take people in our IT group, we can remove them from dealing with things like updates as well as patches and have them focus on the higher value tasks. And then there's also the business agility and the CapEx to OpEx transformation. So really being able to have our usage match our spending, and really that then allows us to reduce our upfront cash outlay. Now, next we'll jump to SaaS here. So what is SaaS? SaaS stands for software as a service. It's a cloud computing model where software applications are provided to users over the internet, and users access the software through a web browser, eliminating the need for installation and maintenance on their local devices. So SaaS is when you log into Facebook. SaaS is when you most likely log into your instance of Workday. SaaS is when you log into something like a DoorDash application. Next slide, please. But why is this beneficial to the customer? And what that ultimately comes down to is the iceberg model. And what this represents is the share of customer IT spend with the cloud software vendor is actually higher because you are paying them for additional services. So if you do take a look at that bottom arrow, but if we go to the top arrow, the customer's total cost of ownership is reduced and becomes lower because you're transferring things like infrastructure, maintenance, patches, upgrades, all to the software vendor. So the true benefit to the customer here is the overall time to deployment, it's the lower maintenance, it's the improved security, but then it's also the reduced total cost of ownership. And I'll go ahead and hand it off to Lee now.
Hi, folks. Hey, Lee here. So next, let's talk about the consideration elements. So go to the next slide. We have really 4 different areas that we're looking at here. From a solution capabilities, to be able to go to SaaS, you want to be able to, a lot of manufacturers are moving to SaaS, and the way they're doing it is to do smart factory type of goals and objectives. And another one is to do data governance and data storage and make sure that they're doing that efficiently as possible. And then also their planning and scheduling, so optimizing their plant capacity. The reason they're doing that is for the platform capabilities. What we've seen is a lot of manufacturers are wanting to move to SaaS or moving to SaaS. And the reason they're doing that is to free up their staff to work on value-added activities. So one of the things, rather than supporting and maintaining computers and software and versions and all that, that they want to offload that and let them work on value-added activities. The next one is the total cost of ownership, the costs of installing servers and the licenses, software licenses, and maintaining those and making sure they're secure. All of those aspects are costs, and SaaS significantly reduces those costs. So we'll talk about that. And then the solution lifecycle. This is really looking at the entire length of the manufacturing solution that you're deploying and maintaining over a period of time. It's got to have the integration and the customization enhancement capabilities as well. So those modern technologies are now part of that solution, so that you can maintain that life cycle and get the upgrades and security patches over a period of time. So let's dig into the next, the specific capability for the platform. These are 7 different, so up one slide, the platform capabilities, 7 key reasons why people are going to SaaS. These are, for scalability and availability. So the resilience of the system, the built-in security and compliance, reducing risk, the data management and governance that we mentioned, the ability to do customization and integration with ERP and plant floor and other systems as well. And then the monitoring and diagnostics, the notifications, and of course the continuous improvement. These are all key capabilities that manufacturers are looking for. So let's go to the next pillar, the total cost of ownership. And this is where we're looking at 3 different deployment environments, either on premises, which the vast majority of manufacturers are still doing today. And then you've got the cloud VPC, virtual private cloud. This is where customers are putting the software in the cloud, but it's in their private cloud, and they're maintaining it. And then the last pillar is the full SaaS. So the difference between those is really at these different layers, all the way from the very bottom, virtualization, storage, servers, networking. Those, if you go to VPC, are now in the cloud and maintained by the cloud provider like AWS, Azure, et cetera. And then the next levels up, the OS, the middleware, the runtime that Smart Factory is storing in, visualization, data analytics. Those are all the application layer things. And all of these can then be managed in a SaaS environment by vendors like GE Vernova with Prophecy Smart Factory. All right, let's go to the next slide. So accelerating digital transformation. So digital transformation is a strategy that a lot of companies have taken on for many years. So this is nothing new. But the software and the areas that they're doing digital transformation is expanding greatly. And MES Smart Factory is one of those areas that has become a key area where people want to go to the cloud. There's still a lot of folks that are have concerns that need to be addressed, and those have been addressed. We'll talk about those in a minute. But the software, it needs to be able to manage these complex solutions, shop floor execution, and leverage the data in a way that allows them to do the continuous improvement. So digital transformation really can't happen without software and that software. So let's take a look at why people are doing that on the next slide. There's a lot of reasons here, right? But I think these will resonate with most of the people on this call. You want to have a single truth of data. You want to have visibility on the enterprise performance. You want to have a best in class across your site. So how do you scale to site 2, site 3, site 4, and have a single solution set that's not unique at each of those sites? So it's really 2 steps. One is the common infrastructure, the SaaS, maintenance, patches, all of that. The other aspect is a template for that solution that includes best practices. And then the ability to grab that rich manufacturing data and do analytics and even AI type solutions with it. So having that in the cloud gives you that compute power. Cost reductions and performance improvement. And then the bottom row is probably the more important in my mindset. The reasons I hear the most are the faster time to value. So being able to have a system turned on in days versus acquiring, purchasing servers, installing software, all of those aspects, much timer faster. And then the high availability and highly scalable. I mentioned going different sites, but the high availability and the resiliency to have backups, different availability zones, all of that is managed by the software vendor and the underlying technology vendor, whether it's AWS or Azure or whatever. And then the increased security that comes with cloud. At first, I think a lot of folks thought, well, it's higher risk, less secure, but what we've seen is the security built in to those and being always managed and tested through for penetration and whatnot is critical and performed today. So let's go to the next slide. So the smart factory use cases.
Sorry, there's a question in the chat.
Yeah.
It's okay. Let me go back and read it. In case of customization like user interface or dedicated services, where will they be hosted as all infrastructure and applications are managed by GE?
So yes, great question. So there's a lot of technology now that we've deployed that enables you to do customize your visualization to create dashboards and whatnot. So one piece is the designer side, which I won't get into, but then the other side is the GraphQL that's in the most recent release. We have a REST API, and we also have Kafka. So multiple ways to access the data. GraphQL then allows a lot more ability, more flexibility to be able to read that information and put it on a display in a customized user experience. It builds out that all of those constraints. So versus where a lot of integrators might have used stored procedures and called those stored procedures to view that information. So this newer technology allows that modern technology allows that capability. All right. Let's go to use cases. So smart factory use cases, everything from planning and scheduling, from when orders need to go into the plant floor to executing those orders on the plant floor, and looking at work instructions and the steps and operations that need to be performed, the genealogy and tracking of of what gets consumed and what gets produced, along with any disruptions that happen at the plant at that time, waste, rework, non-conformance. And then we have the quality management. You're looking at targets and warning limits and basically specifications for the product you're making, taking samples periodically, making sure that all your data is within the center line of where it should be, and providing notifications if it's not. Performance management, this is how you look at how you've been producing on certain equipment or lines and comparing those line to line, site to site, looking at key parameters like efficiency or OEE or true efficiency, net efficiency, and downtime analysis. And then last but not least, and probably most important for a lot of CIOs, is the analysis and analytics that they're trying to drive, such as one that we released in our SaaS offering, which is predictive downtime. It has a training model which learns from past events, and then it has a runtime model which then gives you indication of when downtimes could occur, what the percentage of probability is, and the estimated amount of time to failure. So some pretty cool analytics that are there and building out, and then the ability to build your own analytics, use your own tools, getting access to that rich manufacturing data that we talked about earlier. All right, thank you. I'll pass it over to Lulu.
Thank you, Lee. Hello, everybody. So we talked a little bit about we start with the high level definition. What is SaaS? What is the cloud? And within the context of GE Vernova and our offerings as well, Lee went ahead and deep dived into some of the main benefits, but thinking now more about the applied aspect of it and successful implementations. Where do we start? One of the first questions that we hear oftentimes when we start discussions with customers about where they are, where they want to go, and trying to figure out the gap. And it all starts with data. So what do I mean by this? We hear a lot about AI. We hear a lot about manufacturing execution systems and all sorts of different systems that play together in order to give us visibility into the production data that we need to be able to make informed business decisions. But we need to be able to have a few things in place. And if we think of this from an architectural perspective, ideally, we are able to connect to our machines and get at least some of this data automatically. Once we start collecting this data, and maybe we're thinking about, depending on the needs, a SCADA system. So the users are able to start interacting. Maybe something like being able to start mixing tanks or stop certain things. We start collecting data about different things as needed, whether it is temperature, sensors, or anything we need to keep track of to ensure that we have a quality product at the end of our execution. Then we go into the storage. When we start connecting and collecting this data, you're going to see current data. Now, if you have something like what we highlight here, such as the GE Vernova Historian, you're able to have more information at your disposal and start seeing certain things. Now, it's not only what happened within this hour that I was looking into this screen, but what happened the last 6 months, the last year. And you start being able to figure out trends and things and different things that you may be doing in order to improve. See what's working, what's not, what can be modified or tested. Then we get into monitoring. Let's think here about your manufacturing execution system. You already have some data. You have your historicized data. You can see near real-time data, and you're able to get a deeper contextualization and understanding into what's going on the plant floor. Here you are talking about reporting, about dashboarding, keeping track of your main KPIs, being able to share this data with stakeholders, being able to see reports of your current shift production or something went wrong today. So you want to compare this to a batch that was really good that happened 2 days ago, and you're able to go and do this with pretty minimum effort. As we go through and we have all this data, now we're better able to analyze. And some of this also we can do within the manufacturing execution system, like I was mentioning, maybe comparing batches or comparing different tags, being able to view trends, just different ways of aggregating, I would say, and visualizing the data. Once we know and we can see trends and we are better aware of what is happening and we know the KPIs that we want to keep track of, we go into predicting. If we start thinking about AI or machine learning, it's great that now I know that during the past 6 months, line one had a bottleneck at this main unit and it went down X amount of times. Well, based on that, then I can start predicting. Collecting this information, I know why it went down, I know the different reasons. We can start trying to be more proactive and figure out how to maybe do maintenance more proactively and to be more attuned to different particularities of our system. And that's when you go into optimizing. What can we do moving forward so that we don't find ourselves in the next 6 months having the same amount of downtime? What can we improve? What can we work on so that this looks better for us? Arnie, next slide. And like I said, when we speak of data as being the foundation, then I wanted to highlight a few aspects. The one, first and foremost, quality matters. So if you have good quality data going in, you're going to be able to get good output out of that data. You're going to be able to have a solid base for you to make your business decisions to base them off of that. If we don't have good quality data, then you're going to see things that don't quite make sense, and then you're going to start needing to spend time troubleshooting and figuring out, was that because of, user error? Was something happening at the plant floor at that time? Did something happen with a unit? And it all goes back to just make sure that the quality of the data is good so that we're able to focus on what can we do about those different KPIs that we're trying to keep track of. In addition to this, the important thing is that this data now that we've been collecting it, we have it historicized, we have it within the frame that the software suite provides. It's structured, it's normalized. You want to make sure that you're able to access this data effectively and efficiently so that you're able to make the most out of its usage. And this takes us to the next slide, Arnie, which is rapid development. Because we already have all of this structure put in place, then we are able to get a faster time to value. So the idea here is, let's say, and this is going to go also into the next one a little bit, but you have multiple sites, you are executing the same or similar processes, then you can start thinking about templates. And with templates come the idea that maybe, I don't know, 70, 80% of the processes could be similar. Maybe you have a 20% that's different, and you can start building your first site. You already are 70 or 80% of the way there. Then when you go to the second, to the 14th, the effort, the time involved is going to be much lesser. If we go to the next. And this brings us to the fast time to value conversation, which is, again, focusing on right now with cloud, you have, for example, predictive downtime out of the box. And those are things that can help, like we mentioned, once you have all this, to be able to be quicker into figuring out the issues, but you want to get there as fast as you possibly can. So we can start looking into what does it take to have your system up and running. First of all, to do the implementation, like I said, maybe a templatize that helps, makes it faster. But then once you have it up and running, you want to make sure it's properly maintained, upgraded, updated as needed. So we're working on zero downtime upgrades. We communicate with you if our team is taking care of this. You have a cadence. You know that you are always on the latest and greatest, and you are able to test the updates before they go on your production system. So definitely there's a system well in place to be able to take care of this. Regarding flexibility, like I mentioned, you can have multi-site with cloud currently on the same environment, so that helps with cost, helps with rapid development, and this also helps with scalability. Um, as far as the financials, Lee talked earlier about the total cost of ownership being lesser. This could fall within OpEx instead of CapEx, and then you are able to have a more predictable cash flow because of the way that you are aware of what you're consuming, and if you're going to be adding additional plants, when those will be turned on, and so forth. Next slide, please. Secrets to success. Next one. This is one that I like quite a bit. Another question that we get a lot, right, is what do we need to avoid? We know a lot needs to go right, but what can go wrong? And I think that there's many things that we could discuss here, but a few of the main ones could be, first of all, do you currently have any other any implementation? Do we need to migrate it? Do we know, are we migrating it as is? Do we need to make any updates? Are we completely going to go with something new, different technologies? Let's make sure that we plan accordingly, because this usually is something that you don't want to find out later down the road when it's going to take additional time and resources. If we think about the cost benefit analysis, it's another thing that's very important to have everybody aligned to make sure that everyone understands there is a cost associated, but what is the value, what is the return on this investment that you can expect. Regarding skill set, you want to make sure that once this is all said and done, you're able to hit the ground running. What needs to happen in addition or to this implementation efforts to make sure that the right resources are trained, that the right training is in place, that everybody has what they need so that this actually makes their lives easier. Which takes us to the next one, the focus on change management. We want to make sure everybody's aligned, we have involvement and engagement, and there's a lot of work that can be done around this. Part of this is training, again, to make sure that we are ready when the system is ready. Implementing robust cloud security measures. This is another thing that is taken very seriously that we are able to take care of in the case of our SaaS offering. Another thing that is best discussed early on is integration. As we know, there are other systems that oftentimes integrate with our manufacturing execution systems, our different software suite products, and that could be an ERP system, that could be a quality system, that could be warehouse management or maintenance. So we want to make sure that if we decide which ones of them are going to include and what it will take as far as time. Again, we go back to, do we have the right technologies? Can they both use REST APIs? How are we going to do this, and how long will it take? And do we have the right resources to do this? And then governance. Once we have this implemented, we want to make sure that like we mentioned regarding value and outcomes, that we knew the outcomes we wanted to get out of this, that we knew how to measure those outcomes, and then that we are actually able to do this. And an example of something I've seen done before would be a report where you, with an OEE implementation, you were able to have a baseline measurement at the beginning of the go live, and then throughout, let's say, a period of 6 months, you could see how that trended and get actual values back. Next slide, please. And just very quickly, I know we're almost done with the time, but we wanted to bring this up, and just very quickly why this matters is this was a SaaS implementation of Smart Factory for Papa John's. And I think that thing that we wanted to highlight here is we keep talking about lower costs. We keep talking about GE Vernova resources taking care of maintenance tasks and configuration of servers and installations of software and all of these things. We keep talking about availability and having security concerns taken care of. So the important thing was the challenges around not being able to visualize near real-time data, having manual input challenges. They were not as efficient as they wanted to be, and they were having challenges with costs and not enough resources being able to be put to these tasks. And even when we think about costs, I oftentimes highlight time because it could cost a lot to have servers, but it can also be 6 months before you're able to get them. So just keeping all of this in mind that it may take longer to even get started. So going back to the faster time to value. And after being able to implement the SaaS option, they were able to just have real-time data visibility. They were able to keep track of their main KPIs. They were able to do this at a lower cost and without having to engage additional resources on their end.
Hey, Lulu, we got one question on the chat.
Yes.
As part of Smart Factory SaaS offering, is GE Vernova tech stack ecosystem kept up to date, latest and greatest?
That is a good question. I don't know how fast after something comes out precisely we have it, but I can get back to you. I can ask. And to just summarize, the idea is that with cloud adoption, we are reducing complexity, we're reducing risk, we're better able to implement things such as traceability, operational efficiency, keep up with compliance, and do this in an agile manner. I would say at this point, any other questions, any clarifications anyone may have? All right, I will say, please, 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 if you have a few minutes, go ahead and scan the survey. We love the feedback. We try to make this relevant and something that is worth coming to, so let us know.